No,
New program,
figuring
and
this
my
out
computer
together.
was not handling it. Hey, y'all.
All right. Well, I am. Hey, how are you?
Better now.
Yay.
Well, excited to be a part of this panel, to have you all here. I know some of you for a long time, and Torrin, I'm just getting. I have the book. I've been reading it the last. And so I love the work. I love how honest, how raw you are in your approach, and I'm a fan now. So shouts out to you. Collection.
Thank you.
Okay, do y'all want to kind of give just some very quick introductions for people who are just tuning in? First and foremost, I'm Roscoe. I'm Douglas Powell / Roscoe Burnhams. I am Richmond, Virginia's first poet laureate. I am a spoken word artist. I've published 3 different collections. I published 3 collections. I've been in a ton of literary magazines within the last few years, and then on the stage side, National Poetry Slam champion. I've been a finalist at Sub-5 twice. I've been a new pick champion, local slam champion, regional, all that kind of stuff. Poetry Slam coach as well. I took VCU, the world, the Cup C. So I've been around for. That's a long way of me saying I'm very old, and I've been around. So if we could just kind of go around, Torrin, since I'm new to you, why don't you just give a quick introduction first about your relationship with Page and Stage real quick.
All right. Hey, y'all. I'm Torrin A. Greathouse. So I got my start actually through performance, through like a small performance poetry collective out of UC Irvine. Shout out Southern California. And kind of ended up moving and gravitating a little bit more toward Page just because it was kind of more accessible. A lot of the Southern California scene is very isolated. A lot of schools don't send teams to Cup C either because schools don't give us money or there just aren't really the connections. The scenes that there are, like DPL, are very closed in. It's like, if you don't live in LA, good luck even getting a seat at Poetry Lounge. And so I've really kind of thrown myself mostly into the Page side of things, but also spent a lot of time when I was living in Boston at the Boston Poetry Slam, Feminine Empowerment Movement Slam, some time over at Haley House and House Slam. And yeah, publishing my work pretty broadly through literary magazines. I published my first collection, Wound from the Mouth for Wound, in December of 2020. And I was also recently selected as a National Endowment for the Arts Fellow. So that's kind of where things are right now.
That is amazing and quite accomplished. Kaniki, you want to give a quick introduction about your relationship with Page and Stage?
Yes, I am Kaniki Jakarta. You can call me Kaniki Jakarta because that's what my mama named me. It is my stage name. I am happily serving a 3-year term as the first Black Poet Laureate of Alexandria, Virginia. I have published 3 novels, a memoir, poetry collection, and most recently a poetry and short story collection. I am so much. I do so much. I'm just trying to see what I can put in here. I do consulting. I do publishing. On the low. Now everybody knows. I do poetry. I am a workshop facilitator where I've been facilitating a workshop called Write Like a Woman for 6 years in the Alexandria Alexandria area. I also present Prep to Publish to help people who are in the publishing thought stage to help you. I have a marketing degree, so I also do marketing workshops as well. My day job, I am a human resource specialist where I give people about that, not ready to let that go. So if you're looking to update your resume, get a new job, that thing. So I'm happily also connected with Busboys and Poets in this area where I've been hosting with them for about a decade now. So right now we are doing it virtually and hopefully looking to come back in person. So if you're looking for any of that, I am available to you always on social media, email, and that. Thanks.
Awesome. And I know I've told you this before, but congratulations on being poet laureate because it's amazing.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you. Ms. Mendez.
What's up?
Like the mayor of 757.
Give us a quick intro of your relationship with Page and Stage.
All right. I am the host of the venue on 35th Street in Norfolk, Virginia for going on 10 years now. I'm also an event coordinator there. The founder and creator of Poet Fest, which is an annual poetry-related convention a la Comic-Con style that we do here in Hampton Roads. I've taught creative writing. I've published 2 books. First one, Keys and Crowbars. Second one, Candy and Rigor Mortis, which is all Halloween and horror-based poetry. Yeah, I like writing. That's about it.
And quiet as kept, he is amazing in the poetry slam world. To actually compete with
finals in that area
every time he's competed. So I thought it was really important to bring both of you on because I know you both have a long history with publishing, but also being on stage. Torrin, I've heard like great things about you, and so even though I'm just becoming familiarized. Here to add some perspective, especially after hearing your story about like your journey from Cali to Boston and so forth. So I'll start with the reason why I wanted to have this panel. And that is because in Richmond specifically, there is a little bit of a divide between in the poetry community between people who purely live on the page versus like spoken word or people who bring their poetry to a stage. And so do you differentiate, because all of you have touched the stage at some point. So do you ever differentiate at all being a poet versus being a spoken word artist? And I think actually let's to keep us from talking over each other, let's I tell you what, Kaniki, let's start with you. Because we're the same scene.
Cool. I do. I am a poet who writes poetry. And spoken word poetry is the type of poetry that I do. So there's really no difference, but there's different types of poetry, right? So you know, we have all these people who write haikus. That's the type of poetry that they write, right? So when I get up to speak my poetry, that spoken word is the type of poetry that I present to people. So there's no different. We all have to be writers of poetry first in order to be able to take that to the page if you want to be read or heard. So I like to talk. So I like to be listened to. So being a spoken word artist is great for me. I always say I am a performance poet. And the reason I say that is because I never write particularly for the stage. I write for the page. I read that poetry. I perform it live. So I always say that I'm a performance poet, even though people say that I'm spoken word. So it's the type of poetry. So in essence, is the root of it, in my opinion, is the same. Writer of poetry is what we all are.
I totally agree. I don't like making a clear distinction between the two. Right? See, I have to be a writer first in order to even have these spoken word pieces, right? And I decide to bring them to a stage. George, thanks for that. I want to get you as well.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a writer first. And that's a very, very large umbrella, right? And there are many different categories of writing under that. I also like to write short stories, comic book scripts. That's all different types of writing. The horror poetry is another piece that's under that umbrella. But I feel like there's some poems that live better on the page. That doesn't necessarily mean they can't be brought to the stage, and vice versa. Sarah Kay had probably one of the most concise definitions. She's a spoken word poem is a poem that refuses to stay on the paper. It's a poem that demands that it be heard out loud. You know what I mean? So for me, there's more of a distinction between spoken word and slam than there is between spoken word and page poetry, if that makes sense. A spoken word poem can work great at the open mic. You take that to a competition and you're going to hang. It may not work. So I feel like if you're going to slam and if you're going to compete, those pieces almost need to be tailored for competition. Like that's your sharp sword. You know what I mean? Maybe you walk in with a bamboo staff to just do some spoken word. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but the point being,
you're good.
So total sense.
Okay.
No,
the point being that they're all different.
Real quick before I get Torrin, who looks like she has something to say. Now that's interesting that building the distinction between spoken word and then slam, because you have to have kind of one in order to have the other.
Right.
Yeah?
To me, they're siblings. They're even twins, even. You know what I mean? But individuals at the same time.
Fraternal.
Does that make sense?
Fraternal twins.
They're fraternal twins.
They're identical.
That's the best. Yeah, they're fraternal twins, and to me, and that's kind of just how I've always kind of seen it. You know.
You've done a little bit of. You've run the gamut, right? You've done just some stages in general, and then you've also published. Do you build this distinction between the two?
So I think the idea of the distinction is super complicated, and I love, Kanika, that you brought the idea of it being a form or a genre into the room, because I think that it absolutely is. There is this way in which, like, spoken word is a very specific kind of poetry, and a lot of times what ends up happening because of reasons of class, race, ableism, the craft behind spoken word gets ignored in a lot of white upper class institutions. And I think a lot of page versus stage panels, you look sort of 10, 15, 20 years ago, sort of have this implicit creation of like, well, this panel is actually built for the purpose of setting up stage as a straw man to say stage is worse than page, which is why when I saw that, Roscoe, you were one of the people putting together this, I was like, oh, this is going to be a very different page versus stage format because of who is on this panel. It's like a very different kind of panel. But also like slam, the techniques, the different forms, right? I mean, something I think about a lot is a kind of classic thing you do in slam is if you have a 3-minute slam piece, about 2 minutes, 15 seconds in, you might have that turn, right? That classic slam turn. How is that different from a sonnet's volta? It ain't. It's just a different time scale and it's more lines. But that right there, that's a Petrarchan sonnet. And there's all of these elements of craft that I think are so inherent to the way that things are set up. So to me, I mean, it's not, I wouldn't separate it, but I do think there are different notions of craft and construction that I think are important to kind of separate out in like how you teach and think about them, that I think are really fucking cool. Am I allowed to swear on this panel? I don't know if I'm allowed to say fuck on this panel, but I'm going to.
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Roscoe, Roscoe,
Yes.
Roscoe, you were kind of freezing and doing some things. I don't want people to miss what you said because you are the poet laureate of Richmond, Virginia, and everybody should hear everything that you got to say. So I'm saying you were kind of you were moving around, but I was like, let me jump in and say we don't hear whatever you're saying. We don't know what you said.
I think Wi-Fi it's been great up until it's been great. It's been you guys hear me okay? Yeah. Understanding that spoken word is a genre of poetry as opposed to its own its own separate thing. Is my audio still messing up? Audio some issues.
I can hear you okay.
Oh. Are there some? Do you feel other? Are there things that you have as far as being a creative that you're like, okay, well, only for the page, it will never see a stage, or this is purely for us. You know, this is purely for an audience, not for a reader. Do you guys make those decisions in your work? George?
Yeah, I feel like the piece will let me know what it's gonna be pretty early in the process. Something that I wanted to, yeah, isn't it though? But something that I really wanted to work on, especially when I first started writing, was saying it with less. I really wanted to work on my page work. When you're speaking on spoken word, obviously you can go up there with a haiku and you can make a haiku sound really amazing on stage, but it's 17 syllables. There's not a lot of meat there. With a spoken word piece, it gives you more room to play. You bring theatrics into it. You know, spoken word is very much a marriage of poetry and theater. You get to bring that element in. And then when we're talking about slam, you have more for the judges to judge, which could go both ways, really, you know. But yeah, the meat of it in spoken word is very attractive to me. But I also appreciate the conciseness of like a little shot glass poem that kind of just hits you with some immediacy.
I agree. I don't think that.
Well, one, I don't think that brevity is praised enough, and I know with like individual competitions, I would, for example, they have like a 1 minute round, 2 minute round, so you're able to bring in some short. But I think obviously, you know, it's one of those things where that becomes tailored for competition, but using, you know, like a more performative career, you know, stage, don't really give your audience everything they probably would from a poem, and that, I mean, obviously that may look different from the poet, but it's more that you can do with less words and with breaks and things of that nature when it comes to, you know, sometimes my argument is that what you and jam it on a page, pauses and pacing on a stage. And I think we're, you know, at least, you know, because I'm in a lot more slam spaces than I am not. And I think we're seeing more poets kind of, you know, kind of tinker around with stuff like that, about using pauses in poem, slam stage, or and finding ways to kind of use less words and more theatrics that may create these kind of, you know, that enchantment and line breaks and things of that nature. Can you add anything to that as far as like, is their work is purely meant for on paper versus work meant for?
I think what George said earlier about, the poem will let you know if it's for the stage or not. And I think also the people will let you know if this poem is for the stage or not, because you've written something and you've thought, this is an amazing piece that I must share with people, and you have performed it and people have given you. So you will know if it's a better to be read, to be performed. I think sometimes when you have poetry that has specific words that mean the same thing, like, I was just doing a poem about, let me be your prey, like, hunt me down, be your prey, and let's pray about it. So sometimes when you're listening to you do the word, you can't make a distinction on read too. So sometimes their poetry is read and performed, but sometimes it's better, read after you perform it. So that's my 10 cents.
I think something that I kind of experienced was with this book, I got the experience of getting to record an audiobook for my book, which really tested the idea of poems that I wrote initially thinking, oh, these aren't poems for reading out loud. And then I had to, which I think is kind of a unique challenge. Like, there's a poem on using the women's bathroom where it's W-O and then a line and then M-E-N-S. The idea being the unique threats of both using the men's or women's bathroom as a trans woman. And so the poem literally splits in half and can be read as two different poems.
That's creative.
Or there's a couple of other poems that use like a system of footnotes. And so I had to figure out how to engage reading those. And so I think it kind of becomes a process of like, how do you read some of these things? Especially if y'all know the poet Douglas Kearney, who's like one of the foremost like Black experimental poets who really does like incredible like visual poetics. I've been lucky enough to be working with him right now in my MFA program as my thesis advisor, and like in terms of like poets who will push your idea of like, what is a poem that can be read? Like, he is someone who constantly pushes my idea of like, what can a poem look like on the page? And then how can that move from the page to the stage? Which I think is something that has like kind of unlimited potential. And I think we're constantly fed kind of a very restrictive idea of what that can be and what it can look like.
I agree. I think we have,
years we've been kind of fed that there's always this kind of large distinction.
But to your point, I think that I mean, as long as you're creative, level of 2018, I think it was, brought a contrapuntal as a group piece, where on stage, read the other.
All three voices were able to read. If you saw it on page, I mean, it would obviously look like
a standard contrapuntal with, but
they found a way to introduce this form on the page
and now bringing it to the stage in this very creative and theatrical way, to George's point. As discovered the fluidity, able to take to them. And so it's, I want to see more of that. And so, but the idea page versus stage is a topic, unfortunately, that has existed in Richmond specifically for a very long time. I wanted to have more conversations about how they live in the same world. They live in the same world. And honestly, I don't know if you can really have one to some extent. We have to wrap up. I think it's or it might be now. It's 2:50. Just some last words about as a writer. I'm trying to get to everybody as quickly as possible. And then anything that you want to say about a project or so, page or stage. George.
Yeah, I would say to anybody who's writing, don't get too hung up on what your distinctions are, on what type of writer you are. Just write and let your craft guide you as an artist. And it will. As cliche as that sounds, it will. And as far as the venue, we're hoping to reopen with limited capacity. We're shooting for the end of May, but there'll be more to come with that. Again, thank you for having me. This has been amazing. I've enjoyed every minute of the day. I greatly, greatly appreciate you. That's it.
Yeah, I would say poets who are like dedicated page poets. So many have like, I think especially in academic spaces, this condescension toward the stage. Honestly, if you think you're hot shit, get up on a stage, try reading your poems out loud. And if you think you're a really good fucking poet, read your poem at a slam, see how you score. Because I think every poet needs to learn how to read their poems out loud and really read them if they actually want to exist for real in this game.
Talking about Torn. Okay, I would say that Torn said, and I would say that don't be afraid to take your page to the stage, because I see a lot of times people, they don't want to read, right? Because people are performing. So I've seen some people win slams with the paper. So, I mean, it's tough to do, but if you can learn pieces of that poem, if you're not somebody that memorizes, you can take that page to the stage with you. Don't be afraid to take that paper up there on the stage with you and let people know that you can read. You got a good public school education and you can read in aloud to people. And what else were we supposed to say? Oh, if you're looking for some workshops and you are a woman writer, I am happily presenting Write Like a Woman on virtually and in person coming up next Saturday. So find me and I'll give you the information for that. I mean, it's also good to workshop your pieces so you can hear it and you don't get to get booed. You get to get critiqued in a workshop. So I would say go to some workshops. It doesn't have to be mine, but find some workshops to go to. I'm sure Roscoe has some workshops. You're gonna do some workshops, Roscoe, sometime soon, somewhere or something? If he's not, then he will now since I said it. So yeah.
I just wanted to hop on and say hi, everybody. This was such an awesome panel.
I do have some stuff that I'm gonna add quick. We have Grace coming in. Hey, Grace. I also have a question that we're gonna get to in just a second. We have so we're gonna I'm gonna comment on what Kaniki and I'm gonna answer this question in just a sec. Yes, find some workshops, hone your craft, be present in the spaces that you're in. Honestly, I think everybody kind of echoed this.
Hey, Roscoe.
Yes.
Hey, Roscoe.
Can y'all hear me? Can you guys hear me? Is my audio okay? Okay. We didn't get to hear Roscoe very well because of the audio, but I definitely want to thank you for bringing us on here. I think I speak for all three of us for saying thank you for having us on here. We're so excited.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you all so much.
You know sign language too? You know sign language?
Only a little bit, still learning
I've
some
seen
hard
you
of
sign it.
hearing.
You did the same. I saw that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. This was so great. Thank you for participating in today's festival. We've loved having you. And in just a few minutes, starting at 3:05, we'll have a screening of Roscoe's Comedy. So I hope everyone will come and join us for that. And I hope you'll also just explore the rest of the festival. Thank you all so much. And everyone can just click the leave button. Yes, thank you so much. All right. So great to see y'all. Great to meet you. And have a great day.